Ambulo luku, with whatever we do. Jioni safu nola, with whatever we do. Hale yi demunyu skula, nyepamne ne kudlukula. Nyepangi ragala gena, nyepamne ne kudlukula. Ibuloke numoto ni beti sola. Ibuloke dato ni betoto.
Bigi Congo.
Lamin.
Na?
Lamin te jibe norin te nyame Lamin.
Kabana wulo kono.
Wulo kono nyinta mo Lamin.
Pa bilenki.
Muna ngata afamole.
Haina.
Ngata. Ngodo. Fabrama.
Mingi. Baba nyole.
Namu dole Fabrama.
Namu jumala kan kuma ni ten.
Fabrama.
Jumala mu.
Ndele bare muso.
Lunda mana.
Famo kata.
Jamani mbere.
Alindo ko.
Jamani.
Bari ngoto man kontande.
Bari jamani fana na mundu wa man kontan.
Ngoto minaka ngalamin je fom filitala. Lamin jibe nori nyaala.
Lamin ila sira sama ne benki. Yala so tol sayni no ko mo lakko momo.
Ngoto.
Nam.
Iterinte yalo ne Lamin hakkilo diata bake karambugoto. Anu santeng ministry ko di ngole si suwo ko amanke ko be holiday
si bitun
Bagona de ngabe.
ala ni ko kede namo balo
ala ni na ko na karta bulo be damna ala ni je
ngoto
nam
ngoto mon kontan feren
jamani mu ne keda
ite ka Lamin ki wulo ko no nyintay mon ko do fete malo Lamin nyanta sila la be la moy kala karango
jamani karamol be soron ne ko fasita wulo ko nako
karambugol ma soron ni ko karambugol soron da amanke comme holiday lem ngoto dini ngo nyanta sila la ala karango la moy yamen kaben fue man kontan andamande
alla nyin kombo courant adanda la kombo len do la jan karam ngol le soron do kamen courant ma do la kombo e don dol fana na karam ngol soron je karam ngol soron Lamin adara lo nyino la man tara fe na sokon ala mu nekela
Lamin ite foyde malon kon lesinol be ke kar radio to
Nga fine.
e ko yana ni mod Lamin ya mu na fonye
bir kabin bina kan tambita nteri maning fatu tambite la sukala ala dinngol bebe siri be la moyka
faru danso am fana tambira jele ni subala la ngaje dinngol be je talanta nen kili warol e be seri jele
sa Lamin fadante ku kili wo ke no la ba Lamin bitaka wulo ko no nyinta mo Lamin
aman dara fenela
ite dine ko ni man si yakari lesinol la moy radio to ibalon na
mu ne ka ke afonye ba nyara ni alon
telentel jikot
afonye ba mu ne be ke
ite balon tel be jikritel ni man karambe ku kele yaje nata karana samala ya itarije
par ñarande kombo courant ho findira kombo ide nara yede ni sonka bay ko Lamin ma ñata la wulo ko adu karam mo be so afa ñembe kala
ngoto wole nati bawo ngalle ni Lamin kuntala kombo courant o ka fa me kombo courant asototal wala kinay ko e sisu ko no bari ni ko e sisu ko no ibe karangol di ke la radio lin telel to hani tele masoto to nyaay man tele soto da bongo bar radio be bulen koto batiri sanga ay si ay alamo
sa do kala
nyaadi ko ta ro bulaji
abe ko kala nyaadi
kamun ke nyaadi
radio abe wala mo la ibe mona falaje
ibe la karandirol kala jele
ti talle be radio ko men ga karandirol
ila subjector baby jele baby jele
wala nanga chocho moy fa danso wolya ngombe tambi kana ngadi ningol jebe ikadum bungo ko kada mala mo
asototal de
Lamin mala be kara wala de
bari
lafta alal ideal on ko inde every year second wala fourth
muna ni ko ma ko nde ko folle sinila mba nde le sinilo ne ba
say mba foke en koto wole fango yen wulindi yalo famo keta bat yim fadam bulata ko ko me yen nati jambi Lamin nyanta karana ntel beji ko be nyineka ya bulay kara wulo kono ta kilar ya bambalo yo be bulaje koto dinni ngoy si ayala le sino la moy radio
wala ka munda kara mo man soro Lamin nyanta kara si so na radio
la sila le ayala le sino
dal ko korno ko smolon
kilar ya
mo be ngala ko momo say mi do ni kono kera
Mengi bruzo
ndelo ko la da ba rosa no radio ba no bari woro radio ni abe jele ba ngamra do man dembe guljan dala nyara nyar fo ko fendi mo la Lamin tayra ba rosa
bara te ku folo ajibe nori nya labi tamete ku
teku
bari ngoto famo ke
imagine nani nyambol si zol le keje kisigi man si zol no le kafun ka nyoma bari nyambu kinol ni manya na kafindi ni nambe ko zol la ja
ngalle limbeta de be nyambo do dilanna
nyara ni ko rim fennat nyara nata
ngoto bari famo ke da
ngata bun kono tabi bun kono nyara ngando ko fele nani pelo la ndija
iyo awa better la
bun kono bismillah bisu diara
ye fongo tanka sina dolu tanka koro ta koro
Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. My name is Samuel Emendi. I'm back again with another lesson in ecology, but this time around we are going to look at ecological instrument. And before we go to the ecological instrument, I just want to recap on our previous lesson. Our previous lesson, we were talking about relationships that occurs in an ecosystem. In this relationship, like feeder relationship, in these feeder relationships, we talked about predation. We also talk about competition. We also talk about parasitism, commensalism, mutualism. And also, we also talked about food chain, food web. In food chain and food web, we look at an example of a food chain, an example of a food web. We also did look at pyramid of numbers and pyramid of biomass. And before I make a leave of you that day, I left you with an assignment, which we are going to start before we look at ecological instrument. The assignment is here. And the first question, or number one question, was, when there are no enough resources for all living organisms in community, what is the result? The correct answer is competition. And the last lesson, I said before I make a leave of you, I left an assignment for you to go and practice, or to you to go and do at home. And this assignment, you want to start the correction of the assignment. The first question was, when there are not enough resources for all the organisms in a community, what is the result? We said competition is the answer. What is the result? The result leads to competition. As I was using an illustration there, I said two bulls or two rams cannot drink at the same time, in the same place, at the same time, in the same place in a trough, because they have to compete for the water. The weaker one will have to run away and leave the stronger one, give it a chance to drink. So that's what we're talking about, competition. And we use a diagram there where the sun, plants in a forest, we are competing for sun. The next question is, tapeworms live in the intestine of mammals and steal nutrients from them. This is an example of parasitism. Parasites, they live and they depend on their host for their survival. The next question, the third question was, what type of community interactions lead to co-evolution? What type of community interaction leads to co-evolution? The answer is predation. When an organism eats another organism, it leads those organisms to leave that environment. And the next question is, in a relationship in which one organism is helped and another organism is neither helped nor harm, is called a commensalist organism, a commensalist feeding relationship. In a relationship in which one organism is helped and the other organism is neither helped nor hurt, is an example of a commensalist relationship, feeding relationship. Question number 5. E. coli, is this a bacteria, live in the human colon, the large intestine, where they absorb nutrients and produce vitamin K and sodium that benefits the host. This is an example of mutualism. That means that the bacteria provide vitamin K for the human, and also the E. coli, that is the bacteria, have somewhat nutrients from the human being, from the intestine of the human being. It absorbs nutrients. So that means what? It's a win-win situation. That type of relationship, we said, is a mutualistic relationship. The other part, that was what I was saying in the last class, that this part is used true or false. We said radiant energy from the sun can be directly used as energy source by all organisms. Is that true or is that false? The answer is false. The next question says, all autotrophs obtain energy from the sun via photosynthesis. We also said that is false. We said a food chain shows one pathway of energy in a community, while a food web shows all pathways of energy in a community. Say that is true. That's what a food chain and food web. And the next question was, what happens in a food chain? The previous lesson, we said in a food chain, light energy is converted into chemical energy by green plants during photosynthesis. And that light energy, only 1% of light energy is used. Energy transferred from producers to producers, only 1% of light energy is used. Energy transferred from producers to primary consumers is about 10%. So that means that from the producers, that's the green plant, to primary producers, the energy that's been transferred is only 10%. Where there are secondary and tertiary consumers, there is reduction of energy to successive trophic level. So the energy now is being reduced where there is what we call secondary and tertiary consumers. The energy is reduced from one level to another as it is going. You said this energy reduced, this is due to the fact that not all parts of the organisms are eaten by the consumer, because some part of the organism is not eaten by the consumer. Some are left to decompose. You say some are not also digested and therefore ingestion of feces, while some are used for respiration and some are excreted as what waste product. Some of these organisms are excreted, some of them are removed as what we call waste product. That was the assignment that I gave you. We discussed, I hope all of you had got it all correct. So we are going to proceed with today's lesson, ecological instrument. First of all, when you are going to conduct this activity, talking about ecology, or you have to study a particular habitat, first of all, you must take students, or you take students out from the classroom setting, take them to the field where they are going to do some activities, hands-on activities, where they are going to do some activities with the use of some of these ecological instruments. So first of all, you have to do what you call a field trip. You take the students to the field and then conduct some of these activities. The first instrument here we call a Bowman funnel. What is this funnel used for? If you look at the setup here, we have a funnel, we have a tripod stand and a clamp that holds the funnel, and you have a rubber attached at the bottom of a rubber fitting at the bottom of the funnel. And then you have a small mesh inside the funnel. And then what is this funnel used for? It is used to extract nematodes from soil samples. Like for instance, when you have organisms in the soil, nematodes, you put them in this funnel, and then the light heat that will cause the organisms to move out of the muslin bag and into the bottom of the funnel, where they are collected or examined under a microscope and identified. So likewise, when you put these organisms in this funnel, you allow them, you put them, because of the heat will force these organisms to go down. And as they go down, you can easily collect these organisms and you examine them or you study them. So now this funnel is basically used to study small organisms that are found in the soil. You study them and then from there you identify them and know what type of an organism is this, or what type of an animal is this, because these organisms, they are found inside this soil. Another one, we talk about tolling grain funnel. And this was discovered by one scientist called Albert Tolling. Okay? So now it is used to extract animals from soil by heating the soil on one side. Like if you look at that setup, we have the light, we have the funnel, and you have the alcohol or the fluid, where that animal, when it goes down, is preserved there. The alcohol serves as a preservative medium or material that can keep the animal there, it will not go rotting. So now it is used to extract animals from soil by heating the soil The tolling grain funnel is used to extract animals from the soil by heating the soil on one side. The animals are driven out of the soil by heat from the lamp and fall through a wire gauze. They fall through a wire gauze. So like when they fall through the funnel, they are being kept in that alcohol content for preservation. Grapnel. This type of tool, like the shape look like the anchor of a ship or a boat. Sometimes when some of these people who go on fishing, they use this thing to anchor around the seaside. It is called a grapnel tool. This one is used to grab plants. So it consists of a sturdy pole. You see, the pole is very, very firm with bars at one end. When this grapnel tool is plugged into an aquatic vegetation. Aquatic vegetation, this vegetation where there is a lot of water, like these freshwater ponds and other things, the aquatic vegetation, the plants becomes entangled in the burleys and can be pulled onto dry land. So when you put this in the water, you can drag a lot of things out and then you begin to examine them. And some of these red seaweeds that are in the water, sometimes even at the seashore, if you go around the beachside like Tanje or like Brufut or Sanyang, Gunjur, you see some of these red weeds. They are found, some of these things, you can remove them by the use of this grapnel. When you go into the depth sea or the sea floor, you can use this thing to remove it. These insect nets, it is used for catching flying insects. Like for instance, some of these flying insects like flies or some of these grasshoppers, some of these locusts, you can use these types of insects, this type of net. They have a frame, they have a net and also a long stick that attaches to the frame. This is basically used to catch up insects. Like for instance, when the insects are flying, you swing it around and then it will catch some of these insects. They put them in the trap and you can use them, you study them, and you will study the types of insects and the way their morphology and the way they are formed. So it's used for catching flying insects. The net part should be sufficiently long so that the mouth frame seals off the end of the net, which contains the catch when the net is laid flat. So you can sometimes even this one is also resembled with the one type of net the fishermen uses. Like around the seashore, they can even use it to catch some fish. They set it and they can use it to catch some fish. Okay, the fish net. It is used to collect small fish. Like for instance, some people who have ponds and streams at their homes or in the village, in the neighborhood, they can use this type of net, okay, to catch the fish around in the pond. They have what we call a strong frame and strong fiber. This one is the net that forms the net. So you can easily use it to catch fish. Like you have stagnant water and fish are developing in that area. You can use these types of net to harvest the fish. Even if it is in the deep sea and you have this type of net, you can use them to catch some fish. Because you can just target them when they are cooling around that side, and then you can just cast the net and then catch up the fish. We have the other one we call the plankton net. The plankton net is used to collect microscopic plants and animals from pools and streams. If you are very, very observant, sometimes if you go to some of these swimming pools, you'll see could be somebody who is working there or somebody who is responsible for taking care of the pool. You'll find out that that person, from time to time, either before the arrival of the people or when they finish all their bathing, you see him, he comes out with his net and remove all those microscopic organisms or those small animals that are dead in the water. They remove it and they clean up the pool. These types of net, the mesh size is very, very small. And it's very, very small. It can collect all those small, even the legs of some of these grasshoppers or some of these ants, they can easily be collected with the use of this plankton net. they are very, very effective in cleaning up what swimming pool. And even like when we are sieving water, for instance, when you fetch water from a well that is open in the village, you can use these types of mesh to remove all those sticks and the insects that are dying in the water. You can use this type of mesh size plankton net to remove all those parts of the dead animals or plants that are found in the water. Sweep nets, we said, is also used to collect insects from tall grass. This one, it also has a long frame and a strong frame and a short handle. You can insert a stick inside that where you can extend it at a long distance to capture some of these insects that are found on the trace. The potter. Basically, the potter is used for picking up very small animals. And how do you use this potter? Like, for instance, you can see the potter, it has a place where you can suck. You suck through. And it has a cover, a lid, and it also has a container. And you suck, there's a part that you suck, and the other part you put, you take the other part where the tube that you place over the insect. You place the tube over the insect and you suck through the other part. As you suck, the insect will come through the hollow cavity of the tube inside the container. As it goes inside the container, it is being kept there, and also there must be a protection over the tube that is for sucking, so that the insect does not come into your mouth. We say it is used for picking of very small animals. Sucks through mouthpiece. You suck it through your mouthpiece. That's the end of which is covered with a muslin. A muslin is a type of a paper that you put around, but air can easily penetrate. And the animal is taken into the jar through the mouth of the tube that you put it over the insects. So basically, we use it for catching small insects. A sieve. This is another ecological device or tool or equipment that is used to select. Like, for instance, when you have large organisms and small organisms. So organisms that live in leaf litter can be extracted by using a sieve with a mesh size of about 5 millimeters. This mesh size is a bit small, and you put the insects there, and then normally, like locally, the people use what you call tame. They use it to sieve things, like when you go to the milling machine and you grind coos, or sometimes you pound some of this rice and you want to sieve it so that the bigger size will be at one side and the smaller size will be. So that time you use a form of a sieve. The small ones will be able to pass at a certain hole, and the bigger ones will. Likewise, also, if the people who work on this groundnut, sometimes they make holes on a particular material or a metal, and they will be putting their ground and be shaking it. As they are shaking, they are able to extract the broken ones, and the full ones will be at one side. The full pieces of groundnut will be at one side. The broken one will pass through those holes. They are selecting, they are sieving the good. Say it is used to sieve over beaten trap or a large sheet of paper. Wind vane and anemometer. These two devices, we use them together. The wind vane is used to measure the direction of wind, while the anemometer is used to measure the speed of wind. These are devices that we use to measure the direction of wind and the speed of wind, the wind vane and the anemometer. The next one also, we talk about the rain gauge. It is used to measure the amount of rainfall. Most of the time, how do we use this rain gauge to measure the amount of rainfall? Like, for instance, when the rain is raining, you take a rain gauge, take it out an open place and leave it stand for and as it's standing there, rain will be raining. At the end of the rain, you collect that water, and then you collect that water, the water that is in the rain gauge, and you measure. you'll be able to identify, to know this is the amount of rain that pour in that particular rain. Or like, for instance, some people may use a rain gauge to calculate the amount of rainfall that falls in a country or in a particular location in that year. Like the Gambia, in Birkama, you can use a rain gauge. After every rain, the water is going through that rain gauge, and then you collect all the different rains that have been raining in a year. And after, when you add up all of it, then you come up with a final sum and said, the amount of rainfall in the Gambia or in Birkama in this year is this. So then sometimes the distribution of rain in different communities varies. So we use this rain gauge to measure the amount of rainfall that falls in a particular place. Another thing, or another instrument that we are talking about is what the pitfall trap. A pitfall trap, locally, you see how the setup is, there is a container that is inserted in the soil or on the ground. You dig the ground and insert a container, and then as the animals are moving, they fall inside there. And there's what you call alcohol. The alcohol base is for what? Preservation. We said a jam jar buried in the ground and covered with raised flat stones. It is used to collect ground surface animals, insects, nocturnal and diurnal. Animals that walk during the night, nocturnal, and the one that walks during the day, diurnal animals. Okay, and these are basically, most of the time we capture or we use to measure some of these animals, like the spiders, the centipedes, the beetles, etc. and etc. These are animals that we use what we call a pit trap, a pitfall trap to catch them. Another instrument we are seeing is the searchy dish. A searchy dish is a dish that is a form of circular. It has a rope or an extension where you can let it go down at a particular depth. We said the searchy dish is used to describe the turbidity or the mudness of an aquatic habitat, different times and depth. So now looking at this diagram or looking at that slide that we can see, a searchy dish is being inserted in the water. And here we are going to look at the different turbidity, how clean or how muddy the water is at different times and at different depth. You're able to differentiate. As you are seen it, you'll be able to measure. You insert it down, as you are seeing, you're able to measure and see this time the water is a bit clear, or this time the water is a bit muddy. You'll be able to by the distance from the top of the water as it's going down to the sea floor. So this is done by slowly sinking a weighing searchy dish and noting the depth at which it just cannot be seen. Going down, you just begin to realize that now at this time I cannot see it. So you begin to realize the time, the length at which you are no longer able to see the searchy dish. So we also look at what environmental comparator. We say it's an electric device, often with a digital display, used for accurate measurement of different environmental abiotic factors. And in the last class, when we talk about ecology, we talk about abiotic factors and biotic factors. And we said the abiotic factors, they are the non-living component of the ecosystem. And we said these are temperature, we have the pH, light intensity, and also we talk about biotic factors. Those are the living part, the living component of the ecosystem. So this one is basically used to measure the accurate environmental differences in the abiotic ecosystem. Light meter. Even by the word light, you know that by the word light meter, it is basically used to measure the amount of light. And here they are set up in two. Is supported by another device. So this one is basically used to support, is useful to measure the intensity of light. The next one we have what you call a quadrant. So this is a a square metallic or wooden frame. It is used to determine the number of particular kinds of weeds in a field. A quadrant is this one is mostly used in determining the number of particular weeds in a field. Like for instance, you take students outside in the field, and you are using a quadrant to measure a particular type of weed. Or it could be you are trying to measure the presence of tridrax in a particular environment. Okay? Or there are other types of weeds that you want to measure, whether elephant grass, or whether it could be different types of particular types of weed that you are measuring, and then you use what you call a tridrax to measure these weeds in a particular environment. But how do we use a quadrant? We say how we use a quadrant is toss. What do you mean by toss? Like when footballers are playing, when people are playing a match, you call the captains of the two different teams. You come, you said, which side do you choose? So now when there's a contention that you don't know who is taking this side, who is taking this, you take a coin and you flip it. As like you toss it, either you take the head or the tail. The one that comes up and it's in your favor, that means that you said, I'll select the head and I'll take this post. So now when it falls in your favor, that means that you are in your selection was we are going to give him the more privilege to choose which option that you want to take. So here we are talking about you toss a quadrant over your soldier randomly at several times. When you toss the quadrant severally, wherever the quadrant lands, the number of species there is counted. Like for instance, we are looking at a particular types of weeds, either goat weed or tridrax. So now anytime the tridrax lands on any place that the tridrax lands and there are goat weeds there, then you are able to count how many goat weeds are in this place. The plants partially enclosed are counted as well. Like some of the plants, they did not pass through the holes of the quadrant, but they are partially bent. So those ones, you count them as what? Half. The average number of species for the quadrant is calculated. And then from there, you calculate the average number of species in the quadrant. If the quadrant is 2 meters square, and the field is 25 meters square, then the average, you estimate it with the whole. That means you multiply it by 2, the 25 by 2, for you to have what? The average number of what? The goat weed that you have in that particular environment. This is an example of a homemade quadrant with an area of 0.2 meters square. This one we have this another picture of a quadrant with a marker. So now they are trying to mark the number of weeds and the ones that are bent over. So remember that we said those ones you count them out of at half. So before I make a leaf of you, I have an assignment for you. As it is said, you name this instrument. The instrument you are seeing, what is its name? What is it used for? Or how do you use it? And the next one is what? There's another image that you are seeing here with what we have discussed. Name it. What is it used for? And then the other one is name it. This is another instrument. You name it and state its use. And the other question is also identify the setup, label A to G. This setup, you label it from A to G, and then you identify it, and you name the other parts from A to G. And this is where we are going to stop for today. Until I come your way, I am Samuel Emende. Thank you.